Hello, everyone. Welcome to Symbiosis 3 weekend events. Today, we are going to talk to Natalia, and she's here to share with us some very interesting techniques for treating paper surfaces. If you have seen her work on the exhibition, you can see what wonderful magic she has done to create all those textures with paper. So I'm very interested to see what she's going to share with us today. So thank you, Natalia. Please take it away.
Oh, thank you, Dorothy. Welcome everyone to my presentation. I would like to tell you that what I'm going to share is the result of my experiments as an artist. I'm no way a scientist or a chemist or anything. So maybe there are better ways to do what I do, but these are the results of my exploration. So I will start my presentation sharing my screen. So some surface treatment techniques. For this was most of the techniques are the ones that I employ for my works, for my artworks, for the exhibition, Symbiosis 3. And the first technique that I'm going to talk about is creating ice texture effects on paper. If you've been looking at the exhibition of my works, and this is my second artwork, A Period of Quiescence 2, the second version, and I was inspired by the rose I froze for my artworks. The approach could be very easy to paint in watercolor. It would be easier for me to do that, but I didn't want to be on my comfort zone. So I said, how can I create these texture effects with paper? I wanted to create my own surface. And this was the result that I'm going to share how to do this. And I had no idea how to do this. So my aim was to build up a surface that would suggest the depth of ice. I wanted to create that texture, that is the third dimension on the paper. The materials and tools I used, I was looking, I thought it has to be a very fine paper, very thin. So I thought about working with tissue papers, and then I tried serviettes as well. For creating the look of ice, I thought about the mediums. So I worked with acrylic glazing medium and acrylic gloss medium. I will try both. You will see the results. You will need a large flat brush, not your best brushes, please. I have a container with all brushes that I use only for acrylics because acrylic ruin your brushes. Plastic gift card or any credit card that you don't use anymore. I use a lot for texturing or for applying mediums. A big plastic surface that you have, it can be a bag or whatever you have at home, and a small ceramic dish. So you see that I recycle a lot, and my idea is not to create a big impact on the environment. So I try to recycle as much as I can. And here you can see one of the Twister games. Do you know the Twister game? The plastic that you can jump on top, that was the basis for my covering the table. They were my daughters, they're not used anymore. So the plastic is very handy for my artworks. Here you can see the tissue paper is quite large, and I apply the glazing medium, and look at the effect. The paper really disappears when you apply that one. So it is wet. You need to let it dry. The results of these experiments. Here you can see a comparison. I tried applying the mediums in one side of the paper, on both sides of the paper. What was the comparison of mediums? So here you can see one ply of tissue paper and acrylic gloss medium. It's applied on both sides of the paper with a flat brush. So you apply it on one side, you let it dry, and then you turn it over and apply the medium on the other side. And you let it dry again. Here you have one ply of tissue paper, but instead of gloss medium, I use glazing medium. Glazing medium is thinner, more liquidy than the gloss medium. And this one has been applied on both sides with a flat brush. And it's very interesting to see when you change the paper, the serviettes have a little bit of texture in themselves. So when you apply the acrylic glazing medium, it has totally a different patterns and textures. And this one was applied not with a brush, but with an old gift card on only one side of the paper. Another alternative you can use is to add watercolor or any paint to the glazing medium or to the gloss medium. So you tint the medium. And when you apply it, you have these beautiful effects as well. Here is one ply of serviette that already has patterns and textures, you can see here. And it's applied with a gift card on only one side. The back view is interesting as well, beautiful marks. At the beginning, I was looking for transparency because I was going to work with layers of this tissue paper, and I wanted my writing on the rows to see through. So that's why I was testing for transparency. But I very much like this final result is when you apply two ply of tissue paper, acrylic gloss medium, and use with a brush apply with a brush on both sides of the paper. And I really liked this pearlescent effect. It's very difficult to photograph, so I don't know if you can see it, but the texture is really beautiful. So here you can see the final result of the paper that was used in my artwork. The ice texture effect on paper was successful. But if I wanted to paint the rose in watercolor, you can't paint watercolor on an acrylic surface like that. So you need another medium to make it more absorbent. So I used watercolor ground. There are several brands of watercolor ground. One is more famous than the other ones, is Daniel Smith. And watercolor ground, what it does is, here you have, I took it from the website, danielsmith.com. That's the watercolor ground that I used. It's a foundation of watercolor ground, gives virtually any surface, whatever you use. It can be glass, wood, plastic, stone. You can paint on watercolor or any water-based media on top. So wonderful. One piece of advice when you buy the watercolor ground. Watercolor ground comes in small jars, and if you leave it open for some time, it dries very quickly. So I decant it. I take the amount I'm going to use. I put it in a jar, and I add a little bit of water. You can dilute it a little bit to apply it to the surface, and then cover the rest of the watercolor around the original jar very tightly, because otherwise when you're going to use it again, it will be all dry. So that applies to all the acrylic grounds. Here you can see the results of painting on the acrylic on the ice paper I did with a watercolor ground on top. You can see the beautiful textures that the tissue paper or the serviette gives to the piece. Here is the final piece that was all painted. So then in my artwork, there were layers of acrylic or acetate on top that I did writing, the three writings in 3 languages on top. And that was the how to create ice texture effects. So remember, you can do whatever texture you like using mediums. And then if you want to paint on top, use watercolor round. That is very useful. Another technique that I'm very fond of is aging paper. And I'm going to concentrate, this is a very extensive topic, but I'm going to concentrate on paper dyeing and using tea bags. Those were the 2 techniques I used in my works for the exhibition. Use dried tea bags can add magic to your calligraphic artwork. What is important to know that each brand of tea or of coffee, of tea especially, they have different textures inside. And when you stain them, they create fabulous patterns, but none of them you cannot repeat the same one on the other one. So the patterns are really unique. Some tea stains are very subtle, while others are more obvious and creating interesting, unique marks. And why I love them so much is because they create this aged look. They add texture and they add really character to your artwork. You can see 2 of my pieces where I use dyed paper. Here I did a copy of a manuscript, and you can see the paper staining here with coffee. And this is one I did for the exhibition. The scroll is all done on dyed, on tea dyed paper. What do we need in order to dye paper? We need tea, any kind of tea. You can use the herbal teas, or they have to be staining. So that's what is important. You can use, especially use black tea if I want an aged look, or you can use, if you want a very subtle effect, you can use the berries trees that are very staining. You can use coffee, and I recycle. You know, the coffee pots from the machine, I boil them again and I use that, the grounds, or coffee, maybe jars of instant coffee that are expired, though I use all those and I recycle them. I try not to send so much waste to the tip. So that's why I'm trying to recycle and be really environmentally conscious. You need a shallow tray. It has to be big enough to allow the paper to lie flat. Or if you don't have anything, you can use a pot, but remember that you have to insert the paper vertically, and that's quite more difficult. And a drying rack. So what do we do first? We put our tea, our coffee, or I was trying dyeing one of my daughter's trousers with black, and I used the remaining dye to dye the tea bags, but they don't dye black. They dyed really purple. It was beautiful. You lay the sheets of paper into the tray and twist them gently back and forth, only for a few seconds, because paper otherwise will start to dissolve and disintegrate. And the purpose is to absorb the color. Then you remove them, and you air dry the paper by hanging it on the rack with a couple of pegs or clips. You can also put them on the rack horizontally, and that will create some beautiful patterns as well that we'll show you next. Once dry, you can repeat the whole process if you like your color to deepen. So you are layering color. You repeat the whole process. Look, have a look. This is coffee. And look at the textures. They're beautiful. And then you can start playing. You don't have to really drain all the coffee grounds. You can put them on top. You can add more instant coffee on top. Play with them and look at the beautiful textures that they create. You will never repeat the same. You say, I want to repeat this pattern. You will never achieve it because it's quite unpredictable. But they are all different. They are all beautiful. Try as well as dyeing thicker papers, and this is a paper that really disintegrates if you leave it for just a few seconds. So it started tearing apart. You can see that, but I like that. I think it adds a little bit of character. This is a printing paper. And what about this? What do you think it is? Can you tell me? Any suggestions? Is it coffee? No, it's tea. And the tea, if you dye the paper in tea, look at it's more uniform, the patterns. And it has beautiful patterns, but it's more uniform the coloring of the paper. Here you can see that this has been berry tea back. You can see the pinky color. I could have repeated the process to achieve more, but I wanted really a subtle color. Here you can see the lines of the clothing rack because I let it dry horizontally. So another interesting material to work with is using the tea bags. Okay, and here you can see examples of my work. I did, you can paint on them this has been painted with gouache. I'm going to teach you this one later on. You can layer it. You can paint on them, write on them. And here you can see this one was for my scroll for the exhibition. And you can see that I use all paper bags and they have very beautiful effect. I like them a lot. So how do we use the tea bags? There are several ways to do it. This is one way. You collect all your tea bags and let them dry in a container. The more you let them dry, they will create more staining patterns. So you remove, here you open them carefully. This material is very, very delicate, so you need to be really careful in opening them. You remove everything from there. They have a little bit of metal clip, so you remove that and put all the tea ground on a container. Don't throw that away. I put it in the plants that are especially the plants that like tea and they help with the coloring. So I put that to the plants. And if you put the coffee as well on the plants, it will help to get rid of the snails. You open them very carefully and you can see the beautiful patterns of the tea bags. You don't have to wash them. If you want to wash them, you can wash them and let them dry again. I don't really wash them. And then I put them all together, and you put a paperweight or box on top. I have this metal weight on top, and I left them at least 24 hours to get flat. Another option is some herbal teas. You have different texture of tea bags. The surface is very different color and very delicate as well. Very nice to work with. That's another option. And you don't let them dry. This one was done wet, like it is. Finish my tea. I open this very carefully. The wetter it is, the more delicate the surface. So I washed it carefully, and then I let it dry on a paper towel overnight, and the next day it will be beautiful. For treatment tea bags, what supplies do we need? You need a container with water, especially for rinsing your we will need water for the medium, and then in order to rinse our brush, you need any type of glue, white glue. Here you can see black gesso. I will tell you that's an acrylic round, and you don't say gesso in art, because this is the manufacturer way of calling them, but it's not gesso. Baby towels, your tea bags, a brush, a cheap brush that you use only for acrylic rounds, an old gift card, and masking tape, and a pen to write down the experiment. And very importantly, you have to work on a plastic surface and a little dish for mixing your glue. The first option.
We have a question about the colors being, are they light fast? Do they change with time?
I haven't noticed any change. I haven't changed, because once you size them, it is protected. So they remain like that. They haven't changed colors for the ones that I have done. So here you have the first option that we're going to see is using glue. For using glue, we need 1 part of glue plus 1 part of water. So any glue I use always this one, because the one I have, glue, and then we add water. We mixed very well, and we apply that one on the surface. And but you have to be very careful. It's very delicate, the surface. You start from the center to the sides, and be careful with the borders. They need all of them to be very, very wet. So you stir well this mixture. You apply it with a flat brush on both sides of the tea bags to seal it. So you apply on one side, let it dry, and then you apply it on the other side. And what you're doing is sealing the surface, and then what is called sizing. And you work on a plastic bag, because it's better when you peel the bag from the surface. Once dry, you can write or stamp on it. You can paint on it if you apply the watercolor ground I told you about before. But you need the watercolor ground, you need to let it rest for at least 5 hours. That's the minimum. Okay, if it's better if you let it for 12 hours. I always let it 12 hours. Now, the second option is applying what is commercially known as gesso. I haven't put gesso here because in art, gesso is the traditional gesso or the true gesso that is prepared with other materials. Commercially, they say gesso, but it's not. It's acrylic dispersion rounds. what we need is when you work with acrylic mediums or acrylic paints, there's nothing better than baby towels for cleaning everything, your surface, your hands, and everything. We're using more or less the same materials. And for the gesso, you apply it on one side only, as I did it with a gift card and not with a brush. It's a more uniform result. And very important to take notes for the experiments. And I always take notes on Post-its, but then they fly away. So I just use masking tape and I write everything you've done, because then you forget and you say, oh, what did I do here? And you don't remember. So you need to write down and record your experiments. Here you can see that I use glue and water on one side only of the paper. Then I was curious and I did it on both sides of the paper. That's much better. Glue and water on both sides. Here you can see. And this is the tea bag I told you I dyed with black dye. Look at the effect on the surface. It's not black, but it's this purple. Very nice. Oh, what did I do? Sorry. Oops. And here you can see the black gesso on one side only. You can then flatten it if you want to. I like uneven surfaces. You need to record even the processes that do not work out. Look at the mess I did trying to use black gesso on both sides of the tea bags. And they glue so much that I couldn't remove them afterwards. You can't peel them off. So here I use the black gesso or the black acrylic ground on both sides. And here I diluted that one a little bit. This is very thick. This is diluted. The diluted one, you can peel it off, but ripping it apart, but not the thick gesso was very stuck on the paper. So for next time, I will know that I have to do it only on one side. Then you can layer your tea bags. And sometimes, how many times I have done pieces that I'm not really satisfied with, and I want to change them some way because they look boring. I'm always bored of the black ink on the white paper. So how can you give character to a piece? And this is what I've done, really experimenting. Here I prepare the glue and the water. I don't measure. It's the same when I cook. I don't measure. I just try to get a milk consistency in the mixture. So I do it by eye. You need to really stir well. That was too thick. So I added a little bit more of water. And I say, oh, I'm going to put a tea bag on top. And start from the center always. It has to be very, very wet. Get any air bubbles on it. I'm loving it already. It's just beautiful. have to be patient and try to cover all the surface, especially the borders, not to get any air on it. You can layer another one on top, or you can put watercolor ground once it's dry and paint on top. The possibilities are endless. Just showing you the technique. Then, very important, you let it dry. So there is really a great amount of techniques that you can explore and you can change when you're doing your art or your calligraphy. You can see here I worked on canvas and I wanted to create texture of all the statues and all the monuments that are in Italy. And I was working here with grounds and I applied sand as well. You let it dry and look at the beautiful effects that you can create. You have a lot of grounds, acrylic grounds that you can use. Look at here, the texture of an ancient wall that I work with the lettering. This is from ancient Egypt. I wanted to replicate the texture of the walls. I stamp on it with elements that I have at home, anything, and you create these beautiful ancient walls. If you don't really have acrylic grounds, you don't want to spend money, you can always paint the textures on your pieces. For example, this was for one of the pieces I did for Yves Le Terme build-up capitals, I think. And I wanted to create a papyrus effect, and I just painted the papyrus with a brush. Here you can see part of the final piece. I was talking about the color, Egyptian blue, and I really love the effect on that one. So you can always paint the texture. Another technique that I use for the exhibition is suminagashi, and there are several ways of doing it. I did it very simple with acrylic inks, but very, very diluted because I wanted to create a very diluted effect. This was to illustrate my subconscious mind. So it has to be with all the swirls, and the patterns are really lovely. I use a little bit of pastels on top to cover some of the letters. And then I wanted to create more of an atmospheric effect that is like a smoky effect. So I just tried to put a glassine paper on top on this scroll. So have fun with your experimentation. You can try, and on any piece that you don't like about calligraphy or your art, how many times I've done a watercolor painting and I didn't like the result. So you can use an acrylic ground on top, or you can use a watercolor ground and paint on top and have fun. I never throw away my old pieces or the pieces I'm not happy with. Those are for experiments. And if you try of any of these techniques, please tag me in, and you have here my social media. And that's the end of my presentation. I hope that you find it useful. Are there any questions?
There are some comments, not questions, saying that the making notes on masking tape and taking photos for record keeping is genius. I think so too. Nan says it's a wonderful presentation. So yes. Does anyone have questions for Natalia? Mhm. No questions.
Have you ever tried any of these techniques at home?
How do you store your experiments? Is it in a folder?
I I have this diaries, and you can see I store this was watercolor. I paint it on acrylic, on a layer of acrylic. It took me forever, but I was able to do it. I'm going to put this one, but you can see here, I have a diary and I write down everything I do on this diary. The mediums I use, all the experiments. You have to write always. What surface are you using? What brushes or tools you use for applying your mediums? Um, if it is on one side of the paper or on the both sides of the paper, then you need to write down what colors did you use, because sometimes you want to replicate a technique and you say, oh, I love what I did there, and you can't really remember. So I write everything down, everything. So important, the surface, the tool, and the paints of mediums you use. Is that clear?
Yeah, I think so. Susan is asking, what about lettering on top of tea bags?
Yes, you can use that and the scrolls I did for the exhibition. You can paint on top of the tea bags, and you can write with very useful. You can use the pencil brushes. They work wonderfully. And my scrolls I used almost this one because it doesn't bleed, and some of the tea bags were not treated with a glue, but if you treat them with the glue and the water, they will accept any kind of ink or anything. Just experiment. For example, put on one page, one tea bag without nothing and try to write. And then use on another one, use the glue, the sizing, the glue with the water, let it dry and try to write on there. And compare. That's what I always do, comparison of the different mediums. What do I like the most? Sometimes one medium is not right for what you're looking for, but maybe it's for another technique. And that's what I did with creating the ice effects on paper. I tried different mediums and I like better the glazing medium, or I love the gloss medium, but it was too shiny, so I prefer the glazing medium. So you need to experiment and compare. But it depends on the piece that you want to paint or write. What feelings do you want to convey? So you have to think about all that. In my piece for the icy texture, it have to be a very serene, peaceful, and with cool colors. So all those things you have to take into account when you're going to practice with your surface. What is the atmosphere do you want to convey? Those are the questions that come to my mind when I start practicing. So with the scrolls about the tea bags that I use, the dyed tea bags, I wanted to suggest the passing of time, my learning as an artist. That's why I wanted to age the paper and I wanted to convey the passage of time. That's why I used that effect on the paper. So those are the questions I always ask when I paint or when I do a calligraphic piece of art. Mm,
For dyeing larger sheets of paper, Lily is saying she may experiment with using a wallpaper throw. She's wondering if that might work.
I never tried large pieces of paper. I've never tried that before, especially dye, because you need to have the tray, very large tray to do that. So that's quite difficult. So I've only tried with maximum is A3 paper. That's the largest, because I use the trays, the metal trays that you have in the kitchen. And those are the ones that the largest paper is A3 that I work with.
And yeah, I think those are all the questions that we have. Elif is saying thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us, dear Natalia.
It's a pleasure, my pleasure.
And Nang likes your diary. She said it's so much knowledge in all these pages. Yeah.
I've only started doing art 7 years ago, so and I'm self-taught. I was never I didn't took any workshops with only the extempore workshop, but doesn't apply to the normal art I do. So what I do is generally my experiments. So maybe there are other people that are expert at dyeing paper, but I'm sharing only my humble knowledge of what I as an artist or what I've done, what works for me. Maybe you have a better method of doing it. But what is important for me is not to put too much waste in the bin. It's just to recycle as much as I can, to leave a small print in the environment. That's my intention.
Susan wants to know, where are you going next with your experiments? Are you going to experiment with more experimenting, more colors? What expressions are you going to do?
I'm crazy about paint making. Some people suggested I should demonstrate how to mix pigments, but that's a whole 2-day workshops to show that. It's impossible. You can do, because each pigment is like a different child. It has its you can't do it. It takes a lot of time, and I have to explain there is a lot of chemistry in there. So it's very difficult. And I will die experimenting, I think. It's just something that is in. Look, I really get bored of the white paper. That's my, as a watercolor painter, I never buy watercolor paper. I work on wood and I work on other surfaces because I really get bored. And for me, it's so much fun breaking the rules of the purist thing of the academy, that you have to do this way. No, why not? I'm very curious, and that's what I try to do. To say, why not? Why can't I do this one on another surface? And that's my question. And then I start trying, and then I said, oh, it works. And that's what I did here.
That's a wonderful attitude. Yeah, thank you. So good. And I guess that brings us to the end of the presentation, because I don't see any other questions. So we'll stop the recording. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.